Oh, I mean, I'm thrilled. It's probably, I mean, looking at this earlier today, actually, it's one of their best starts in the last 15 seasons. They haven't touched 10 wins in their first 14 games since 2010, 2011. I'm not trying to jinx that as they go into Vegas tomorrow night, but you look at the fact that this group started with 3 rookies on the roster, and they've still got 2 that are making a huge impact. They're playing with fire. They're playing with pace more often than not. They've had a few games just like, what are we actually doing out there? But there's an extra pep to their step, and I think a lot of that can be attributed to what Todd McClellan has brought in. I know we talked about him last year after the fact. And there's just a renewed sense of urgency, it seems like, with this team. And the fact that they're sitting tied for the second most points in the league right now, I think speaks a lot to that.
I agree, and I do think that's a big part of this change. It's strange because I feel like the 4 teams in our Detroit market, the 4 professional teams, are all kind of generally following the same path. The Red Wings might have been a little bit behind, but in kind of a strange way, because they were following the young core type of thing that I feel like a lot of the other teams are doing. The Pistons have a young core, the Tigers have a young core, the Lions have a young core, and they're kind of building around that, trying to get a culture guy in there. They didn't really get their culture coach until the end of last season with McClellan. Now it seems like that's working under him, as you referenced. And we hadn't seen some of the young guys because in hockey it does take a little while. I guess unless you're Emmett Finney, then it doesn't take very long, but I have liked how these guys have played on the main roster. I know the Griffins are playing well too. It's kind of giving me a bit of a Tigers vibe, because this is what we followed all season on the Tigers side of things, that not only was the main roster performing pretty well while the average age was a little bit lower, with kind of some veterans, some value veterans added in, which I want to talk about, but the minor league teams were also playing very well, which seemed to bode well for the future. And now we've got an undefeated Griffins team and a Red Wings team that, like you said, Ryan, is starting out hotter than I think a lot of people expected.
Oh, totally. I think that just coming out of the month of October, over 500 would have been probably a win for most of us that were watching from afar. But to enter November and now you're 9-4 in the season, that's probably their best case scenario coming out of it. And you mentioned that the comparison to the Tigers in particular, I know we talked about that is around the Olympic time frame, and how a lot of that has just taken time, right? These guys to finally make it to the roster, into the big leagues, and make an impact. And we're starting to see that we have Sandy and Pellica. I know we had talked about him ad nauseum previously. Emmett Finney, the surprise, I think, to literally everyone in the fan base and even the organization. Then Brandon Nygaard, who started with the team, he hit his 9 games. They got sent back down because they can work with his contract and slide it. But that's not to say that we couldn't see him back up at some point this season if he lights it up down there. So it's really interesting that we're not even talking about a guy like Nate Danielson, who seemingly, based on Todd McClellan in the preseason, for his injury, it almost seemed like he was going to be a lock to be on this roster. And maybe that would have been in lieu of Brandon Nygaard. But the excitement level, I think, with the youth, and then you've got the core who's firing on all cylinders. I mean, Larkin, he's been, I think, top 5 in scoring right now. You've got Alex DeBrink and Lucas Raymond, both, all 3 of those guys averaging over a point per game. Like the right things are clicking for a team that I think as a whole hasn't really hit its stride yet. And they're also doing this, mind you, without Patrick Kane.
That's the big one. I feel like between the young additions and then also the veteran additions that they got, we've almost kind of forgotten about that. It occurred to me when Van Riemsdyk came out there and did the 4th shootout attempt in this last game. It was like, it was just kind of hitting me. I don't know why it took to that for me for that to occur to me. I knew Kane was out, obviously, but it was like, we would have seen Kane by by shootout attempt number 4, he would have been one of the first 3 here. And then to see Van Riemsdyk, who was the difference in that shootout, that reminded me of that. But famously from the same draft, getting him and Bernard Docker and some of the other guys in there. Appleton has played well. I feel like all of the new guys, I'm curious of your assessment of each one, but it feels like all the new guys, and then obviously the big acquisition of the goalie of Gibson, I feel like all the new guys have acquitted themselves well, even though they were lower level acquisitions on the veteran free agency side of things.
Yeah, the Appleton call out because he stepped up in a big way, right? When Raymond was down, Kane was down at the same time, you saw Appleton step up and play on that wing alongside Larry McPhinney, and he didn't miss a beat. He was able to pop in a few goals, got 6 points in 13 games. I don't think that for the expectation you probably had with him, you can ask for much more. He's contributing great on the penalty kill. And then you kind of move your way down, like ASP. We already touched on him, what the impact that he's making defensively. And you go further, you mentioned Bernard Docker. I think that he's had a sound start to the season along with Travis Hamonic. It's kind of a back and forth between those two. I mean, Hamonic reminds me a lot of Justin Hall, who unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, was waived and down to Grand Rapids. But the fact that they're able to rotate these guys out a little bit, especially on the defensive side, it speaks to the depth they're kind of playing with, but also the fact the system is working for what they're able to bring in with Trent Money on the side of things. And I think that speaks to the 9-4 record. And to that matter, the penalty kill, which has been kind of the Achilles heel of the team, and now they're top 10 in the penalty kill right now, and it's early in the season. But I think last year they had a below 70% rate through their first 10 games or so. And right now I think they're hovering around 85, 90%. So the fact that they've had that kind of flip on its head on top of the players they've brought in, you mentioned Gibson, had a few outstanding starts already, along with Cam Talbot. They've been equally playing 7 games apiece, but they're stealing games, I think, in a way that we haven't necessarily seen the last several years, and they're feeding off of each other in all the right ways, and I think that's fantastic.
We talked about this a little bit in a previous interview, but I think it was impressive what McClellan was able to do with that short season that he had, coming in and having to try to turn the culture around. But there is something to be said. This happens all the time, but we don't really track it, I don't think, well enough. When you have a full off season with a team, whether it's an injury replacement mid-season or it's a coach, whatever it is, being able, especially with a coach like him, being able to see the nuances of these different players in a camp format and in practice more often, that you can see why that would be a compounding effect. But you bring up another important piece of this, which is Trent Yawney. He's clearly been a big piece, and I got to think it's the hat. I think I wouldn't be able to wear that type of hat, but I feel like he draws power from that hat.
He really does sport that well on the away games, doesn't he? He's out there, he shows no fear with it, and he's just, bam, I am here, and I'm going to make your life hell on the defensive side of things.
He looks like he's a character from Fight Club in that hat. I feel like he's like the old grizzled veteran that is advising a young Brad Pitt or Edward Norton in the Fight Club game with that hat. Yeah, that he does. The look on the bench when they go to him is always the same, and he always nails it with that hat. But yeah, he's done a great job, and the coaching staff as a whole. They obviously replaced the goalie coach as well. But I want to talk about the goalie combination a little bit more, because that was the big acquisition in the offseason, but it's been kind of, like you've said, a rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation. So I want to talk about how that's changed the math and the situation for the goalie, even for the future here for the Wings. But we'll take a quick break and come back with Ryan Randall of the Grind Line podcast. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
From the Scully Statewide Moving Studios.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at Jethro.fm.
Coming back here with Ryan Randall, talking about sandwiches, hats, and also hockey. Ryan, I did ask my producer, I turned to him in between the segment, and I said, I think you would look good in one of those hats. And he had to look up what we were talking about, and he did confirm that he does indeed have a Trent Yawney hat. So that I think that needs to be a trend. Instead of, you know how the stadiums, they do like a white out or whatever it is, and they all wear one color. I think everybody should wear a hat for one of the games. Can you imagine like 20,000 fans at LCA all having a hat?
Ooh, we need a Yanni night is basically what you're saying.
Exactly. I think that would be. I think the energy there would be electric, or everybody would be silent. I don't know if they would be like Yanni and just all stand like with their arms kind of folded, but then it'd be super intense. Like then the opposing team wouldn't know what to do with that kind of atmosphere. It's like, I've got 20,000 Yannis in the house. I don't know what to do with this.
I mean, just think if they comp that with a flannel night in lieu with the hat. What's the hat called? What's the proper term for that hat?
I'm not sure. Big G, I think, is going to be able to help us. He looked it up.
It's called a driver's cap.
Oh, I wouldn't have known that one.
Driver's cap with flannel. You can do that. You can pay homage to Trent, and you can pay homage to Mickey Redmond with the flannel. Like, it could be one heck of a night.
I think we're on to something here. I think we might have to present this to the Red Wings, especially in their centennial season. They're doing different promotions. I like this. We're on to something. But I like that we always get some brainstorming done, and we talk some good Wings here. But yeah, there's more Wings to talk about. I mean, the goalie situation has been great. I am a big. It feels like Talbot has gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit because he's always been kind of the solid pair with whoever he's been paired with throughout his Red Wings tenure. Now he's got a guy that's really a counterpart with him, and I was going to say next that Talbot is probably on his way out, but I'm not saying that because of his play. I'm saying that because of his advanced age, but he's still looking very good. But it seems that the progression here was supposed to be, okay, we're going to get Gibson in, and then Talbot will play until he's done, and then kind of age out, and then give way to likely Kosa, and then he can be paired. He can be the young goalie learning from Gibson, and we've got kind of a progression going. Then maybe Augustine gets into the mix or what have you. But I'm really impressed with this goalie pair because, yeah, the defense has had some blips. It's been a lot more solid this year, but those two back there, they don't give away a lot of cheap ones, and when it's mattered, they've really been very solid as a pair, and like you said, have worked very well together, where there's not really a big difference between what's happening out there night to night, no matter if the back of the uniform says Talbot or Gibson.
Yeah, and I think that's been important because, like I mentioned just a little bit ago, they split the start 7-7, right? But you look at the loss. I mean, Cam Talbot's rocking with a 5-1, with Gibson going 4-3. But that's really not to say that the losses have been bad outside. I mean, arguably for Gibson, he had a rocky start in that Montreal opener that just wasn't pleasant from really any sense of the word when you watch that game. But since then, he's stolen the game. He's been in overtime, and you look what these two can do. You mentioned Talbot being 38. He won't be 39 until after the season's over. Is this likely his last year? It could be. I mean, with the way that he looks on the ice, the way he looked last night, going into the shootout, he's playing fresh. The key thing, I think, as we talk about any goalies, is will they both stay healthy? I know that Gibson's got a little bit of back and forth with that. Talbot had a little bit of issue last season. But I think to that point, and as you mentioned it, you got Sebastian Kosa, you've got Pastava, both are just crushing down in Grand Rapids. I think you can go with either guy at this point to bring in as an as-needed basis to back these two up. But what I appreciate about Talbot and Gibson right now is they are splitting time. They're not necessarily, they're riding the hot hand, but at the same time, they're also making sure that both guys are staying fresh enough to give this an opportunity to win. To go back on the Yanni defense piece, they're playing well more often than not. And some of these guys, in a way that we haven't really seen the last several seasons, they're clearing the lanes. They're keeping things a little less hectic. Yes, it does happen. And we've seen it a little bit in breakdowns late in games of late. But I think what's important is they both look comfortable. They're both in the puck well. They're able to make the saves in a timely manner to help this team win, which is, again, I'll say probably over and over again, something we aren't very familiar with over the last couple seasons.
There are a few things that are different about this team, and one of the things I was thinking about while you were making all those great points is the fact that I think one of the other parts, we always use the word grit for Detroit sports teams, and they do seem grittier with some of the acquisitions and some of the young guys. They've clearly focused on that, and then that's kind of making the team grittier as a whole. But that also doubles into a bit of resiliency when playing these games, because with these long seasons, the Lions have always been good at it. The Tigers were typically pretty good at it with 162 game season, but you're going to take some bad losses. There's two that I can think of this season, but they bounced back from those losses very well. They're not letting that stick with them, because although the McClellan time frame went pretty well last year, it was kind of murky with they would go on a 7-game win streak, but then they would go on a several game losing streak as well. And this team isn't looking like that's as much of an issue, because I think they do have that grit and toughness to say, hey, no, we're going to forget about that one. Okay, yeah, that game went awry. We're not going to worry about that. Between whether it's the goalie pairing, the difference in the defense, you can even see the improved alignment as the season has gone on. Early season, there were some communication issues, but now it seems to be getting better. But whatever these games are, they've had a lot of different style of wins. They've had low scoring wins. They've had games where they've had to come back from a several goal deficit, and they've won one of those. It seems like their ability to win in these different ways is going to be good, because, yeah, like you said, hockey changes from night to night, and you never know quite what you're going to get and how the puck is going to bounce, and if the bounces are going your way. But if they can roll with those punches and win from these different phases, then that's going to bode well as the season goes on here.
Yeah, I think the bounce back point is the biggest one, because one of the main things that McClellan harped on when he came in last season as an outsider is he saw the team as being very fragile, right? So you open up the season with a 5-1 goose egg to Montreal, but then you come out and win 5 straight. Yeah, that's been 2 losses to the New York Islanders, and now you go back and win 3 straight. You lose to Anaheim, really what was a pretty bad game. You bounce right back on the road and win another one. You won on this road trip right now, they've won 3 or 4, hoping to win 4 or 5 as they go into Vegas tomorrow night. But to be able to respond the way they have to this point, I think speaks a lot to McClellan. It speaks a lot to the leadership and how they're trying to change things and shift things in the right direction. But it also speaks to the fact that they're doing it in a lot of different ways. You mentioned the low-scoring games. They have a 2-1 OT victory over Tampa. That was a wild game. But they're also scoring goals. They had a 6-4 comeback win against St. Louis a couple nights later. That one, I think, was... I envy my cousin because he was at that game when it was 4-0. I was like, oh, this is not a fun one to be on a date with. But they end up coming back and scoring 6 straight goals. So there's things from this team that we've seen that are repeats in terms of you come out flat and you don't react and you just kind of, the game is what it is. But then we also see, like, the St. Louis game, I think, is a great example of what this team might be built to do, and they're not going to give up as what we're typically used to seeing. And if that's going to be the case moving forward, if they're able to limit those losses to 1 or 2 at a time in terms of a losing streak, that's a recipe for success over the course of an 82-game season.
I agree, and I think you hit on it earlier in the interview, but one of the most heartening things about this team is that it's not probably the final product either. You've got some like you said, you've got young guys that were sent down and could come back up. We didn't see Danielson, which we thought we might. He might be coming. Some of these young Griffins might be coming. You've got Kane that hasn't been a part of the fold for most of the season so far, and so you add those pieces in and they're looking even better, and you're deepening those lines. But the fact that Finney and some of these other guys have filled filled holes that much better and much earlier than they thought is incredible to me. So it's been a wild season, but it's been fun because they're entertaining games. Like I said, 2 of the games basically were kind of start to finish not very good from the Red Wings side of things. All the other games have been exciting and played very hard, and I think that should continue over the course of the season. And we're happy to be covering it from week to week here. So you'll see Ryan and a bunch of the folks that cover it for us back here on the show. But be sure to tell people where they can follow you and tell people about the podcast here.
Yeah, you can find us on any of the podcast platforms, the Grindline Podcast. You can find us on YouTube, X, I believe, Greg Agate, on Instagram, Facebook, I believe, Blue Sky, pretty much anywhere you can think of, you can find us. We have a nice partnership with Vintage Detroit in Metro Detroit. It's over in the shop. They're our go-to for jerseys. Unfortunately, don't have the Centennial. That's another story. So really, anywhere that you look online, you type in the Grindline Podcast, you will are likely to find us there. So give us a follow if you can. And yeah, enjoy this hockey season while it's going.
Definitely follow these guys. It's great stuff, as you can tell with Ryan. They've got some humor. They've got a lot of knowledge. And Ryan, feel free to run with my driver's cap idea with Vintage Detroit if you want to too. I'll give you permission.
I'll reach out to the Wings on that one. See we something going, and all credit to you guys for it.
Well, that's where you have to get Vintage Detroit to make the hat, and then that way they can benefit by selling 20,000 hats, and then we'll load LCA with all the drivers' caps.
You might be onto something with that one. We might be able to get Lynn on board if we're going that route.
Well, see, we do some designing with my business with different clothing and stuff, so we're a little familiar with it. So yeah, we'll talk offline about that. But we'll have Ryan back on. It's great information. We appreciate you joining the show, and we look forward to having you back on later in the season here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me back on. It's great times. So the Wings.
Exactly. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks to Ryan Randall. Appreciate him coming on.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, DDS, Calder Financial Group, Grand Management, Rydan Investments, JH Realty Partners, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.